Welcome to another episode of Pint with Seaniebee, episode 115. I don't know where 2019 is going at all. Anyway, just wanted another shout out to those of you who have already supported the podcast on Patreon. The address is www.patreon.com/Seaniebee. The Patreon approach to podcasting is an attempt by podcasters to work out ways of self-funding their podcast. I believe there are now 660,000 podcasts out there around the world at the moment, which is crazy. For the first time in podcasting history, more Americans have listened to podcasts than have not listened to podcasts. And it is a growing phenomenon, ostensibly, I think, because people have tired of radio and tired of the wall-to-wall crap advertising on radio and tired of the sheep-dip nature of radio and tired of the general noise that all radio stations have. So podcasting is a quieter, more in-depth and more engaging way for people who are at the gym or on their daily commute or out for a walk or putting themselves to sleep or whatever. And for that reason, I think we're getting an awful lot of growth. Media companies have failed to understand the clear need out there for people to go deep on subjects that they're interested in. And mainstream media doesn't tend to do that. Newspapers did, but television and radio certainly don't tend to. So the podcasting juggernaut continues apace, and I have joined Patreon basically to support other podcasters and myself. The show is not free to produce by any means. I have to pay platforms and trips to meet my guests. I insist on doing interviews face to face. So listen, any of you who haven't yet subscribed and have the money, and it doesn't need to be an awful lot, $1 or $2 a month, would be absolutely fantastic, and I'd really appreciate it. The website again is www.patreon.com/Seaniebee. Today's podcast is noisy. We recorded it in the Groucho Club in London sometime at the end of last year. One of the glaring omissions in today's chat is it was recorded before Ole Gunnar Solskjaer took over at Manchester United. The resulting success has been amazing to behold. So I'm talking to Theo Delaney, who is a massive Spurs fan, and those friends of mine who know how much I love Man United would probably be a bit questioning as to why I never brought up the recent success that Manchester United have had since Solskjaer took over. I was in a depression back when I recorded this with Theo because Mourinho was still in charge. Anyway, good on Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. This is coming out the week that he just turned over Paris Saint-Germain in that amazing game in Paris. Theo Delaney is a sports nut. He's a producer, director, journalist, lots of stuff. Really interesting guy and we had a great conversation. So without further ado, don't forget to sign up to the podcast. Here's Theo Delaney. Welcome to A Pint with Seaniebee, coming to you from the Groucho Club in London. It's a little bit noisy, but that is the ambience of a Wednesday morning stroke afternoon in one of the trendiest little spots in Soho. I've got a very famous dynastic advertising commercials stroke filmmaker, stroke Spurs supporter, stroke writer, stroke journalist, all those things with me today. His name is Theo Delaney. He comes from a very famous family of creative people. How are you, sir?
I'm very well.
This is not his first podcast. He has his own podcast, which is all about Spurs, because he's a lifelong Spurs fan. What's your podcast called?
The Spurs Show.
Are they going to win the Premier League?
Probably.
But soon?
I think they could. Every year they're written off and not expected to be in the running. Every year they're in the running. They'll be in the running this year. Yeah, it'll happen.
Tell me a bit about the Delaney thing. How come all of the Delaneys are so famous in advertising and creative industries?
Well, so the generation that first went into it is my father's generation. So he's the oldest of 8 children. First one to get into it was the second oldest, who's Paul Delaney, known as Uncle Bonkers within the family. And they all lived in a council house in Stanmore. Irish father.
Where's Stanmore in
Northwest London.
Northwest London, right?
They had an Irish.
Yeah, where?
So he's from County Down. Newry.
Okay.
Newry is where is our ancestral home, if you like. And a mother who was from Liverpool, and so they were kind of working class family. Although they were kind of one of those families, a bit working class, bit middle class, because my granddad had been to university and stuff. Anyway, he'd come over. He'd studied chemistry, and he was a bit of a scientist. He got a job at Kodak. But they had 8 children, so they ended up in a council house, probably a 4-bedroom council house in Stanmore. So they had this Scouse mum, Irish dad, a lot of what we now call banter going on in the house constantly. But Paul ended up going out with this girl whose dad worked in advertising and said, you should come and I can get you a job in advertising. So he started as account man, ended up as creative. He got his brother Tim in, and then Tim did really well. And then my dad, he did other things. Like they together they had a rock and roll club in the early 60s. They claim it's the first rock and roll club in London. The Kings played there, the Moody Blues and the Who and people like that. Then he goes into the theatre. Yeah. Ended up a stage manager, apparently the youngest stage manager there ever was or something like that. Then he ended up a film extra. But when he became a film extra, he became very politically aware and became extremely left-wing. And he set up a kind of breakaway group, very left-wing group from the Film Extras Union, and fell in with the Redgraves and the Workers' Revolutionary Party. Then we went to live on a council estate because we were so skint. Started getting bits of freelance work from his brothers, and that's how he got into advertising. So he got into it a lot later. So there was the 3 of them. Then the 4th brother, who did go to university, comes out. Greg Delaney comes out, gets in. Then his other brother, and then so it happened like that. And then I'm the next generation. I'm the oldest of the next generation.
Yeah.
So
a lot of competition between them all.
Not as much as you might expect. They all had their own agencies at one point. I mean, there was Legis Delaney, and there was Fletcher Shelton Delaney, and there was Delaney, and there were various other iterations.
It's funny that there is no other family like that. It's weird, isn't it?
No, not quite, no. Yeah. And then, of course, all the next generation got into it. So me and my brothers got into it, my cousins.
So for Christmas dinners were all, did you see that ad? Yeah, I did that.
A little bit. Well, some people were more obsessed than others. You'd get some people who really just wanted to get away from it, didn't talk about it at all. But then you'd go into a room in whoever's house it was, and you'd find the real hardcore just sitting there with their old D&AD annuals. Yeah. And you think, come on, it's Christmas.
Which one did the Abbey endings? Tim?
No, that wasn't us. That was Tim Mellors with Tony Kaye. Yeah.
So Tony Kaye is another person who looms large in your life. You started as a journalist. Yeah. You met him, and he was the guy who sparked the seed of directing, right? In your
kind of. Well, I started actually as a runner. I didn't know anything about film or anything like that. I got a job by accident as a runner when I was 18, stoned out of my mind, and my aunt said, we're setting up production, get a job as a runner. Quickly,
so a runner is the dog's body who goes, just runs and does every errand on the shoot, And
within weeks I get the idea of this industry, which I knew nothing about before, and I got this idea of this star system of all these incredible directors, and I became fascinated. I was already obsessed with football and music, and it became a third obsession, and then so much so that within a year I was writing articles for the trade press. So the 2 careers were going in parallel, the production, so I worked my way up from runner to production assistant, but I was also writing these articles, and then I quickly realised, as did everyone else around me, that I was absolutely useless at film production, rubbish, I couldn't concentrate on the detail of nuts and bolts and the money and all that. So I ended up focusing on the writing for a while. Became the news editor of a magazine called Direction, which was a fantastic monthly glossy that did advertising and design and photography and stuff. Met Tony Kaye, who had come from nowhere, had been a laughing stock, and just at the time I interviewed him, I did a cover profile of him. He'd suddenly gone from zero to hero. He'd made 2 ads within the space of weeks, which were like 2 of the greatest ads anyone had ever seen. One was the Intercity Relaxez-vous, and the other one was the Furry Friends for the Solid Advisor.
Just for those who don't know Tony Kaye, there'll be a link to some of these ads that we're talking about in the blurb of the podcast. He was, if there was ever probably a person who defined the term enfant terrible, it would be probably him. Where did he come from?
Well, he'd grown up in kind of humble background in North London. He had a terrible stammer. He was kind of dyslexic, but he somehow got to art school. When he got to art school, suddenly something clicked in him. He thought, I found something I want to do. And he was good at design and being an art director. And he was incredibly determined. He had this amazing drive. And he ended up getting a job as an art director. And he worked at CDP, one of the great agencies of the era. And he was known as a complete one-off. He was so determined, but he had this kind of childlike thing about him where he was, always stuttering, but he's just so incredibly determined. And then he'd done some good press ads and print ads, but he'd never even really done a commercial. And he suddenly decided, I have to be a director.
Yes.
And there's all sorts of theories why he just felt completely convinced he had to be a director. But he had no credentials for it, even fewer credentials than most people who come out of bad agencies to be a director. You know? And so for a while he really struggled. But he did crazy things, like he threw all those leaflets off the top of Saatchi's building in Charlotte Street, proclaiming himself as the greatest director ever.
Yeah.
He took a full-page ad in the London Evening Standard, big newspaper, very expensive thing to do, which just said, Tony Kaye is the greatest British film director since Alfred Hitchcock. He did crazy shit like that.
Actually, one of my, if I had to pick my top 5 favourite ads, one of his would be in there, which is and it was so audacious, I love it, and it was, in hindsight, way out of his time, which was the Dunlop tyres tested for the unexpected, which was just
insane.
Yeah, again, anyone listening, have a look at the link to the ad, but just the sheer, the piano coming off the cliff, just all those
just
crazy.
Everything in there. Anything you could think of, we put it in.
Yeah.
Colorised it. No one had ever colorised an ad before in that way.
Yeah.
The casting, which was always his big thing, was insane.
The big fat
guy. It was
guy.
just it was basically like a hallucinogenic trip.
It was.
That's what the ad was like.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been radical as a pop video.
Exactly.
Or, But it really worked.
How did you bump into him then?
So basically, what happened was, I'm sitting in the office. I'm on this magazine. I'm the news editor. My specialism, and I really was a specialist, was commercials and commercial production as opposed to all the print stuff. And the editor comes in one day. He was a brilliant bloke. He's still around, Paul Quarry, and he basically taught me how to write properly. Before that, I was winging it. And he came and he said, everyone's talking about this ad one Monday morning. Have you seen it over the weekend? I said, what ad? He said, for British Rail. It's incredible. It is like, everyone's talking about it. It's like the greatest thing you've ever, it's like nothing you've ever seen. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. He said, you're supposed to be in charge of this stuff. You don't even know. I said, I don't know anything about it. He said, find out who did it, for Christ's sake. Yeah. So I started speculating all the usual names and stuff.
And of course, this is pre-internet, so you couldn't just go online and see it.
You had to make some furious phone calls on landlines. There were no mobiles. And incredibly annoyingly, he got to the answer before me, and he said, it's Tony Kaye. And I said, Tony Kaye, don't be stupid. He's a complete larp. There's no way he's going to even be given a job like that, let alone do the greatest. By the way, I haven't seen it yet. I can't dial it up. I'm only getting this. But it turned out it was Tony Kaye. This extraordinary thing where he'd gone from complete laughingstock to making this unbelievable, groundbreaking ad.
So the ad we're talking about is a black and white Louis Armstrong track. Animated chess pieces are yawning and falling asleep, and business shoes are turning into slippers, and it's just showing the relaxing idea of a train journey versus a car journey, and it's very beautifully done.
Literally like nothing else you'd ever seen anywhere, let alone in
and
the
also
ad
highly inaccurate, because British Rail at the time.
Totally. That was one of the great things about it. It made British Rail look like an absolute a day in the best spa in the world, when in fact everyone knew that the train was always late and you couldn't get a seat, and the sandwiches were curled up.
Mind you, you would sort of say that trains have moved towards that.
Yeah.
Today they're clean and they're nice and they're not screwed up the way they were.
Just not at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm thinking, Christ, I need to go and see this guy. And before you know it, the other one's come out, the Solid Fuel one, which has got a dog and a cat and a mouse arriving in front of a beautiful coal fire and giving each other a kiss.
Yeah.
To the soundtrack
shot in the camera.
Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow? All done in the camera,
I know that they dip the mouse in cat piss or something.
There's so many theories about that.
Yeah.
If you asked Tony at the time, which obviously I did, he said God did it. That's all he had to say about it. He felt like he'd struggled so long that God had done him a turn to make it work, basically. So I said, right, Tony Kaye, okay, I've got to go and see him. And before I knew it, I'm doing a massive profile of him and putting him on the front cover of the magazine, which is great. But we hit it off. We're both Tottenham fans. That helped. And we had the same enthusiasms, basically, football and advertising. I was well into it at the time. I was so in. And so we really hit it off. And there were so many stories and lots of, not all of them complimentary about him, that you could get from people and everything. And so it was one of those pieces. It wrote itself. It was so exciting to write. There was so much material, even without the interview, and the interview was compelling as well. Put it on the front cover of the magazine, but I thought he might not like it because I put all it was warts and all,
Yeah.
And he called me up. I said that he'd waited from like 6 a.m. outside the big magazine shop over here in Old Compton Street, waiting for the magazine store. As soon as it opened, he was through the door, picked one up, read it. He said, I read it again, and then I bought every magazine. He said, and then I took it to my, that night, there was a family party where all his uncles and aunts and cousins, and he said he stood at the front door of the party and handed them out as the people arrived.
Wow.
He was so pleased. He thought, like, this is it, this is what I've always dreamed of. Made the 2 ads, now I'm on the cover of the magazine.
Yeah.
It says I'm great, I'm brilliant at what I'm doing. So of course that was like
there was sort of a childlike quality to him, as you said.
Totally, that was almost the overriding characteristic.
Which came to a head when you came to leave of his club. But how did you join? So you joined.
So basically, we became friends, and within no time, as far as you can be a friend. He always said, "I don't have friends because I'm too focused on the work." But as far as you could be his friend, I was his friend. I mean, we could spend hours on this. One story leads to another. But he said he phones me up one day and says, "I want to have lunch with you. I've got something to talk to you about." He says, "I want you to write my film." I said, what film? Feature film. I want you to write it. Why do you want me to write it? You're the best writer. I know. I think you're brilliant. This is on the basis that I'd written an article about him that he liked. So I said, right, and I'm thinking, this is nonsense, and then he said, you've got to take this seriously. So he got his chequebook out and wrote me a cheque for £500. Now, at the time, to me, that was a hell of a lot of money. I'm thinking, bloody hell, he's serious. I said, what's the film about? He said, we'll have another meeting, I'll tell you what it's about. So we had another meeting, and I said, well, come on, what's it about? He said, the film, it's a brilliant idea. This is it. The film is about my life. It was like
no wonder he wanted you to write
it was a biopic.
Did you do it?
Well, I started it, but I mean, you can't describe the chaos of being around Tony. I mean,
well, of course, he eventually broke into Hollywood and made an absolutely fantastic movie called American History X, which he walked away from.
And I think disowned, and then
Edward Norton, the actor, had to take up the reins and finish it, and it was all a storm out. And he is a tantrum thrower of the highest order, right?
Yeah. But I mean, that's just one small aspect of his very complicated and highly entertaining and compelling personality. He's amazing.
So you tried to do his movie, and then you started working with him.
Well, what happened was eventually I thought I don't want to be a full-time journalist anymore. I loved being a journalist, but people had started to say to me, you should be a director. Again, based on nothing. I'd done a stint.
Someone said I should be a director once upon a time, and I was like,
around that time they were looking for people who seemed like they were a bit different or a bit bright, because they were looking for directors. It's the complete opposite now. There's so many directors, it's unbelievable. You trip over them as you walk through solo.
Well, you said in an interview I was reading over the weekend that when you first started directing, it was like you were riding a Bronco. I like that analogy.
Yeah, it was like
and the jobs go by and you start learning, and eventually you tame it. And eventually you tame it. And what better guy to ride a Bronco with than Tony Kaye?
Well, he'd been doing it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he did, of course. And eventually he tamed the horse, and then he became one of the world's great horsemen, So that's what I did, because I didn't know what I was doing. I hadn't been to film school. I didn't know any of the basics of film at all. But basically what happened, I left the magazine. I wanted to get into other things. I wanted to write his film. I wanted to write other stuff. I wanted to do freelance writing. But I'd also I was tempted by these people, one or two people had said, you should be a director. Maybe you come and direct with us. And I said to Tony, look, a couple of people have said I should direct. And he said, that's it. Yeah, that's it. Oh, genius. You can direct. I said, I'm leaving the magazine to go freelance. He said, take a desk at my office. So I took a desk, turned up, he's not there. He was more often than not there. All these people in this office don't know who the hell I am. They're not expecting me. They don't, who the hell are you? He hadn't told them. Did a day there. Halfway through the afternoon, there was a young girl there about my age who came up and said, are you busy at the moment? Her name was Patricia Murphy. I said, yeah, kind of busy, got a few things on. She said, oh, don't worry then. And I said, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? She said, oh, it's just that Tony said you'd be my producer. I said, no, there must be a mistake. I'm not a producer. No, there must be. So she said, okay. So I left the office in the evening and walked down the street, and there's Tony walking out the other way. And he went, how did you get? Is it all right? I said, yes, fine, thank you very much. Got the desk. I said, apart from somebody said to me in the afternoon, Patricia said that you'd said hi, Peter, producer. You must have got me mixed up. And he went, you don't mind that, do you? And I went, well, yeah, but Tony, I'm not a producer. I don't know what to. I've never been a producer. I don't know. And he said, don't worry about that. All they do, producers, all they do is lie. I said, what do you mean? He said, that is all they do. You can lie, can't you? And I just went, I suppose so. So he basically wanted me to be a producer for this young girl who had zero experience as well, that he'd met because she worked in Comedy Garson where he went to buy his clothes. Yeah. She wanted to be a director. He thought, if I'm her producer, because I had contacts in the business, it would all work out. Yeah. So I did that for a little while. But the understanding was that I'd do that for a little while and then I'd get a chance to be a director. That's how it worked. Yeah.
And so you worked with him for a couple of years doing...
I worked with him for a while trying to get going, got a couple of little jobs, and then he fell in love with a model from Romania who he gave the company to run. So you've got me directing, I don't know what I'm doing. You've got Patricia directing, doesn't know what she's doing. I get this job in from an agency, she keeps quoting it at like 5 times what it should be, and the agency says, look, if you don't leave that company, you won't be able to do that job. So I leave the company, but they said, but don't tell Tony because we don't want him to know that we've told you that. So I leave the company. I say, Tony, I'm leaving. Tony hits the fucking roof. He starts saying stuff like, "You were nothing when I met you."
I made the BBC.
Yeah. And he pursued, because he's so determined. Like Patricia said to me at the time, to him everything's a war. And that was one of his catchphrases. He used to say to us, "It's war. It's war." He didn't follow it up. There was no context. He just said that.
Thank God.
Yeah. And he phoned up my mother at home, and there we got a number. He's very worried about Theo. He's going to Spots Films. They're only interested in the money. He's being exploited. My mum was really worried. He went up to my dad in the restaurant, did the same speech. But I left, and he said, and he vowed never to speak to me again. And I think it's now, let me think, it must be like 27 years.
You've met him a few times, and he just
I've
blanks
met him
you.
to the extent where once I went to the mill doing my post-production. Across a corridor, which was another open door, he's singing another post-production. So I look around, there he is, it's Tony. So I'm like, "Tony!" And he looks around and sees it's
closes.
me. No, he didn't even do that. He was parallel. He saw it as me, then he looked straight ahead at his monitor and pretended he couldn't hear me or anything. So I went up to him, I walked right up to him, so I was inches away, but "Tony, hello!" And he was rigid. He would not look around.
Tony, if you're listening to this, mate, this is Sean from Ireland. Give old Theo a call, go out for a pint. Life's too short.
Yeah.
What is he doing now, actually?
Well,
Because he has gone quiet.
yeah, you always think he's gone quiet, and then something happens. He's made a few films, and he made an ad a couple of years ago that was very him, that came over. Like,
What was that one?
It was for sausages. It was for this black guy who'd been a Tory candidate and now had a farm somewhere in the southwest, and had hired him to make this commercial. And the commercial was like 2-3 minutes long,
Right,
and
right.
it was classic
I'll have a look for
Tony.
it and see if I can stick
Well,
it.
it went out once because they thought, well, Tony, I can just hear Tony saying, "This is what we do, it's genius. We'll just buy one, we'll use all the money to buy one slot, it'll be like 3 minutes long."
Yeah.
And everyone will go mad for it. Things like he's still
The world
doing.
doesn't work that way
he's
anymore.
still doing all the similar stuff. I think he's always got films in development. Every now and then you pick up a proper newspaper broadsheet or something, and there'll be a big profile of him, you know.
He's
Because
also famous for
great
wanting
copy.
he wanted to do a poo in a museum once, didn't he?
Yeah, I've forgotten that one.
To take out. Anyway, so you ended up through that sort of not chance, but through that kind of as ever odd way becoming a director.
Yeah.
You made hundreds of commercials, award-winning commercials across the board around the world.
Yeah.
You then got into content, which is a kind of industry expression for things that aren't TV ads, I suppose. But
but still made for clients generally.
and that's your company called Watchable.
Yeah.
Why is it that we don't have British Rail style ads, Dunlop style ads? Why don't we ever see those ads that you wish you'd made anymore? Because we
funny,
don't.
I kind of stopped analysing it very much because I'm just so slightly exasperated by it. But also, at the end of the day, it's advertising, so you shouldn't lose too much sleep, I think, about that stuff. But just recently, there's been an ad on for Audi. Audi made fabulous ads for so many years. No, that was quite good. That was good.
Yeah.
But
sorry,
they're still making
a good ad. Sorry.
Yeah, that was a good ad. But no, but there's an ad on at the moment for about them. They've just made an electric car, and it's such a terrible ad. They basically it's like they've given up. It's the brief in the form of a television commercial.
Nearly all
but
of them are.
yeah, exactly, especially car. But what's depressing about it is that it's Audi. Audi, when I was a kid, was a really niche, unusual little brand, and thanks to Bartolomeo Hegarty and brilliant marketing people at Audi, it's a brilliant brand and they have great products, but it's the advertising that did it.
The Yuppie one would probably be one of my favourite ads as well.
I mean, there's endless great examples, going right back to Vorsprung der Technik,
as they
how the
say
Germans
in
get on.
Germany.
Yeah, I mean, it's just brilliant, and so brilliant because they created a brand and everything that advertising is supposed to be about, and now they make really terrible.
Chunky. They still say Vorsprung der Technik, but in a very insipid way.
And the other thing I walked past the other day, because I was walking down the street and there was a bus shelter ad, really boring shot of a bar, and there's a girl holding a pint glass, and you just see the ESS of Guinness.
No, I've written about this.
What, with the together?
I've actually written an article about
where it
this.
says togetherness.
Yeah.
And I think, what the
I'll send it
fuck?
to you. Yeah, I did a whole piece on that.
Really? That's such a coincidence, because I'm thinking,
Yeah,
oh my
how
God.
shit is that?
I'm
Yeah.
thinking, oh my God, that's Guinness.
That was made by the Irish ad agency, and it is
It's running
terrible.
all over the
yeah,
place.
I
And
know.
I'm thinking, that's Guinness.
That's the best they can do. Yeah.
That is Guinness. All those great ads.
That's hilarious you brought
They
that
made
up.
great ads for decades,
Yeah.
right back to the 40s and the 30s.
That's
and
hilarious.
they're doing that. that ad could be, that's pathetic. That's the sort of ad that the first year ad student does and gets bollocked. And the reason why it's shocking is because, like Audi, it's a niche brand. It has to be. You have to make it special. You have to make it esoteric and aspirational. The minute you try and do something like that, you're dead. Because nobody tries Guinness because they think they might like the taste. They're doing it for other reasons.
I think that there's something more sinister or something afoot where it's almost like it's become the algorithm. Advertising has become the algorithm. And it doesn't matter what is being stuck into the tube that goes into the algorithm, as long as the algorithm delivers to your phone and my phone or whatever. Whereas before there was a real understanding that if you're going to spend $100 on advertising and you make something really out there or touching or really emotive, you'll get 130 or 140 bucks worth of value.
Right. Yeah.
And now I'd say you're putting the 100 in and you're getting 60. You know.
Yeah. But I think it's because also advertising. It's a massive industry. It's like a big manufacturing industry. It's become commoditized. And it's full of people not taking risks.
Yeah.
It's not worth their while to take risks. I think.
They do say. I mean, some people say, "Oh, we're just two old fellas saying the good old days of advertising." But I was analysing this very thought, and I said, no. Just as a consumer of media, in the 90s and 80s, there would always be about 5 or 6 things I go, wish I did that. Everything else was also shit then.
Still nearly all shit.
But there's none of those even. No. There isn't even the top 1% anymore. So
so it's partly people aren't taking risks. Also, all the money's being sucked up, like in every single business, like in the way the whole world is. All the money's being sucked up for shareholder value and all that. So spending less money on ads because the shareholders want it in the bloody pension funds and everything.
What do you say to a kid who wants to get into directing today?
Well, to get into directing, that analogy that I drew about getting on the bucking horse and holding on, you don't need to do that so much now because it's so accessible filmmaking. So there's endless online resources. Cameras are cheap. Editing software is more or less free. I mean, people do come and see me. A kid came to see me, a couple of weeks ago, and I think the thing you've got to do is start making films. Because you can. There's no reason not to. Yeah, you can make perfectly good films. I mean, you use your phone, use your bit of software that you've on your phone or and just make films. Also, many, many more film courses now. In those days, there were 2 film schools and that's it. But now all the art schools and polytechnics and universities, they do film course. A lot of them do good film courses. So you either do a film course or do your own film course by learning on the job, so that when you turn up to be a runner, you'll have some credentials. You'll be able to help them out with their editing and you'll have an idea about how cameras work and stuff like that. And it's still a brilliant thing. I mean, there's more film than ever. There's more demand for film than ever. But I tell you the big difference is in those days when I got into commercials was the thing to be in because much bigger budgets in commercials.
There's money in it.
You were filming in commercials with the same equipment and the same crews as were making the big feature films. So I was working when I was a runner, the cameraman might have just gone out of Africa. Literally. I mean, that's what they were. They were the top guys, and we were using the same cameras and the same lenses and the same frames, etc.
That's right. You don't see the big British Airways. No. You don't see those big budget blockbusters anymore.
It's not as sexy to get into. I remember having a stupid conversation with the blokes working in television and me going on about working in ads, and this guy lost. I must have been just being a tosser because the guy eventually suddenly turned to me and went, "I'm sick of listening to this shit. Just because you're in ads and I'm only in television, you think you're like the big." It would be the opposite conversation now, of course.
Yeah.
Because now all the best work's being done and the interesting work's being done in television and films, and commercials have a poor relation, which is what it should have been in the first place, really.
Did you want to make a feature, or have you made a feature?
I made a short film at the turn of the century, and it went down well, and it played the festivals, won some awards, and I got the call that you get if you make a good, successful short film from Working Title. They said, come in. They wanted to have a relationship where anything I was developing, they got to see first. And so you get into that. We had a new production company, Hotspur and Argyle. But what happened was I didn't have the sufficient emotional stamina to go through the old development hell cliche. Pay someone to be your development person, you pay someone to be a writer.
Yeah.
You do a draft, you take it to the people at Working Title or whatever, and they say, no, you want to make it more like this, and then you do it again in another 6 months, and then occasionally someone says, oh yeah, well, I think we'll get the money for this, we're very close, and then it turns out you're not. All commercial directors like me will be familiar with all this story.
Yeah.
Most end up not making one or two end up making one, and it's just not even a hit or anything, and they really, I admire them enormously for doing it. Just occasionally, someone breaks through, like Jonathan Glazer, obviously.
Yeah. I made a movie in 2003.
Really?
Produced it, script edited, acted in it, and it was...
Wow.
the long lunch. But I said to the director, who was a colleague of mine, Tony Redman, let's make the feed. He'd written a whole bunch of scripts, and I said, let's just pick one and make it because we'll fail quicker. And he went, what? I said, well, everyone fails, but let's go and do it. Yeah. And it was a proper shot on 16mm, and it was car crashes and anal sex and bad language and everything. It was a heist gone wrong movie. It's called The Long Lunch. A trailer of it online. I haven't been able to see whether it went online, but great to do. As I said, I put maybe 50 grand into it or whatever. But you just could have bought a speedboat. But I did a movie with this guy, and we went through all of the turmoil and whatnot, but I'm proud of it. It's a good thing to have done.
It's a great thing to have done.
Yeah, but gee, it's hard.
It's really hard. So what I realised was that I really wanted to do a movie, but I wasn't desperate to do a movie at all costs. I think you've got to be that to get it done.
That's why I didn't. I was also toying with opening up my own ad agency, and I don't like it enough to do it. Exactly. So away from the ad movie business, what's your view on where we're at in the world today? Brexit, etc.
Well, it's very extremely depressing. You wake up every day and you think, I can't believe this has happened. Well, Brexit's a big disaster. Basically,
you still have your dad's socialist streak.
I am of the left. We're all of the left in our family, and always have been. My dad ended up, in fact, he was very far left, and then he ended up more like the mainstream left, and was actually instrumental in the advent of New Labour and everything like that. He became Kinnock's ad man and Gordon Brown's right hand man and all that. I despair, that basically the right one. When the Soviet Union collapsed, and nobody was a fan of the Soviet Union, God knows, but it was like the argument was lost, and there's been rampant capitalism ever since, and the consequences are all too clear, and people suffer everywhere, and things like stupid things that don't really matter, like the demise of creative advertising, are also a result of that, because all the money's been sucked upwards to the people who own the shares and who just want to get richer, and it's everywhere, and Brexit's part of that, and Trump's part of that. And
the neoliberal thing is it's some of the arguments though when you try and debate, and the obvious one is, well, we'll all end up eating with a bowl of rice if we all reduce equality. Is that what you want? Or preposterous. We don't want socialism because we tried that, and millions of people died all over the world. And it's not about that. It's like a newism. Is what we need. We need capitalists to stop just splurging and looking at.
There's nothing wrong with capitalism per se. There's nothing wrong with private enterprise. God knows. I mean, we don't want nationalised, nail parlours and corner shops and stuff, do we? But it just needs to be regulated, and that's always been the way. Everyone wants a mixed economy. There's always been mixed economies wherever you go. It's a question of what the mix is, but most crucially how you regulate it and how you redistribute and create a safety net. And we now look back to the mid-90s, and it looks like a golden age in this country. You just think, wow.
There's another thing here, though, which is that probably the worst offenders are people who have come from nothing. And what I mean by that is the people who have pulled themselves up by their bootstraps to become very wealthy. They're the ones who don't seem to get the fact that not everyone can do that. And they sort of go, well, I did it, and why don't you? All you got to do is apply yourself. And if you're
also, what's interesting about that, they say that as if everyone could and should do it. So where does that leave it? How many nurses are we going to end up with if everyone's going around trying to get rich? How many nurses? How many policemen? What are you going to say to an underpaid policeman or a nurse? Well, I got rich by going out and starting businesses and being ruthless and single-minded and energetic and ambitious. You're just a nurse. What happens when you have your heart attack?
There was a great story about Kerry Packer when I was living in Australia, where he had a very bad heart attack and he was rushed to Vincent's Hospital in Sydney, and there was an Irish nurse there. There was no doctor, and he was going, and no one would do the fucking defib on him, and so she stepped in and she fucking pumped him back to life. Fucking broke every rule in the fucking no nurse should even touch that fucking machine. So anyway, Packer came to and heard the story and wanted to meet this nurse, and she was from Ireland. She ended up marrying a friend of mine. He said to her, "I want you to become my private doctor or my private nurse." He said, "Like, what are you on?" And she's like, 30,000. Well, you're on 130,000. You're going to be flying everywhere. And she went happy day. So she left the nurse and she became his private nurse. And she'd go off in the fucking Learjet, and she'd make sure he took his pills, and she was there. And in fairness to Packer, he made sure every ambulance in Sydney had a defib unit. They became known as Packer Whackers. And a deeply Trumpish, unpleasant kind of guy. But anyway, and she's going around the world to casinos, and she'd be given $5,000 when he'd arrive at a casino, and he would instruct her, just go and play, and if whatever you win, but don't keep it.
Yeah.
Play, because he wanted his staff to be seen to be playing in the casino while he went to the high rolling tables. Anyway, I think she did it for a couple of years. She came to leave, and a bit like you and Mr. Kaye, walked in, and she was going to get married to a guy in Ireland. He said, no, you're not allowed to leave. I'm increasing your salary to 250. She's going, no, it's not about the money. I want to go back. Okay, who is this guy?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to buy him a practice in Dublin. No, you know, he was like Mr. Burns, reaching for the safe.
Yeah.
You know?
He didn't think there was anything he couldn't do with the money.
Exactly, and you know, this is the thing where nursing is a vocation. This idea that you help other people.
Yeah.
This idea that people need help.
Yeah.
And that the people who
they don't get it. Those people.
I think people like Buffett, and some of them do.
Yeah.
And that, you know, they've done good things.
Yeah.
You know, there is the pinker approach to life, which is that we are living in the best of times.
The thing is, we are living in the best. There's so many reasons to think that, and poverty is an all-time world poverty, world starvation. All those things are improving. Medical science improves and communication improves. But you feel like right now it's going backwards. What's worrying is this march of right-wing populism doesn't look like it's being repelled very well at the moment. That's the worry.
The idea of aggressive leftism as well as a problem, which is
I don't think that will help either. So,
what do you say to your younger self? Last question: if you could go back and speak to that runner or even younger.
I think what I did was I had no qualifications. I had a few contacts, and I just kept going and just kept going. And I think I wouldn't change that. That's what got me through. You know, I had a certain amount of self-belief. Always believe in yourself. Always keep going. It's a bit obvious, trite things to say, but those are the things that get you there. But what I'd say is try to study a little bit more. Because I learnt on the job, and I probably could have read a few more books about directing instead of watching football all the time.
And what year are Spurs going to win the Premier League?
It's imminent. I feel it's imminent. Don't laugh.
I'm not.
You know, it could go out. We could be on the brink of disaster with this new stadium and all the money going out of it. And Pochettino, you know, anything could happen. At the end of the season, Pochettino could go to Real Madrid. We get a crap manager in. We haven't got any money to buy players. The next thing you know, you're in the bottom third of the table, hoping not to go down with this great white elephant of a stadium. But I don't think. On the other hand, Pochettino is one of the best managers there is in the world.
Yeah.
We have a fantastic squad of players.
Yeah.
I mean, there's talk of Spurs, of money coming in, of American owners coming in and stuff like that, and that might be the thing that along with the new stadium, puts on the same level financially with because we're well punching above our weight. All the other 5 teams in the Big Six have got way more money than us, but if we get the same money with that manager and the core of that squad, we'll easily win the league.
They remind me of when I started supporting United in the 70s and 80s. They break your heart.
Yeah.
They play good football. Yeah. They're trying. Yeah. They let you down. Yeah. They do a Spurs. Yeah. But that's what supporting a club is all about. You know.
I love those United.
I prefer if United were getting. Teams, I prefer if we were getting stuffed 4-5-1, but still playing great football. Yeah. Theo Delaney, thanks for being on a Pint, for joining me. Sorry for all the noise, folks. We'll hopefully fix that in the edit. But look after yourself. Keep making great work, and thanks. Jesus Christ. Might even put this in. Yeah. Keep making great work. Keep supporting Spurs, and thanks a million for being on the show.
Thank you, Sean. Enjoyed it.
Okay, cheers.